Hello, thank you very much. So my name is Ivan Kuckir, and I would like to tell you something about my work about the photo editor Photopea. Oh, sorry. Yes, so Photopea is an advanced photo editor. This talk will be separated into three parts. In the first part, I will tell you something about my motivation. Why did I do it? In the second part, I will tell more about the software, about the capabilities, and at the last part, I will tell you something about the process of creating it and what obstacles did I have and what were the challenges around it. So let me tell you something about myself. I come from the Czech Republic, but originally I was born in Ukraine. So I traveled a lot, and between 2009 and 2017, I was studying computer science. My first experience with programming was about in 2006 when I did some experiments with Adobe Macromedia Flash, which later became Adobe Flash. And I started to do experiments with JavaScript in about 2011. And these were usually just like some games, toys. And I created several web games in JavaScript. You can see the previews of my games at the bottom. And for example, the one at the bottom in the middle is called Dino Hunt 2, and it was quite popular. Several years ago, it was played by 1,000 people every day for a whole year, which was quite a lot for me. So that's what I did before Photopea. So let's have a look at Photopea. So as I said before, I was doing some JavaScript experiments between 2011 and 2013. And for example, I was interested in 3D games, 3D graphics, and I made some parsers for 3D formats in JavaScript. And for example, these were parsers for OBJ format, MD2, 3ds from 3D Studio Max, and Collada. And in 2012, I had an idea to create a library for PSD format, for graphics format of Adobe Photoshop. So that was my original idea, to create a simple parser which will be used by other people as a JavaScript library. So I did it. I made a simple library, but then I thought I enjoyed it, creating it, and then I thought let's make some visualization of the image itself. So I made a simple UI where you could see the preview of the PSD file and the list of layers, what layers are available in that PSD file. And then I decided let's add simple features like hiding layers or moving the layers around and exporting the result as JPEG and PNG. And but keeping it simple, no complex features. So that was how the whole editor started. So as I said, it was just experiment with the PSD format and a simple viewer of PSD files. So I made the first release of Photopea in September 2013. And you can see at the bottom right corner, there's a preview of the first version of Photopea. So there were layers, as I said, on the right side, which were the basic feature, and the preview in the middle. And you could hide layers, move them around. So you could not save your work. You could not create new documents. You could not save documents. You could only view existing files in Photopea. And it was like this for half a year or a year. Let's move on. So let's see what Photopea is now. So it is a web app which runs at www.photopea.com. Photopea was since the beginning, it was made using JavaScript and open web formats. It never required any plugins. And at the moment, it has the full support of PSD format, XD format, Sketch format, GIMP format, XCF, and it also supports basic image files such as PNGs, JPEGs, TIFF, SVG, PDF. And It also supports raw photos such as DNG, NEF from Nikon, CR2 from Canon, ARW from Sony. At the moment, Photopea is available at, it says 35, but 2 days ago the next language was added, so it's 36 now. It's localized in 36 languages. So you can switch the language in the menu, and it will be, the user interface will be in, for example, in French. And all these translations were made by fans of Photopea, users of Photopea. So I only created the English and Czech version, and all the rest were made by users. And my big motivation behind creating it was to get rid of obstacles between switching from different programs. Like, for example, some people were used to Photoshop and had all their files in PSD, and it was hard to open PSD with GIMP, for example. And the same way, some people are used to GIMP and had all their work in XCF files, which were not openable in Photoshop. So, but when you have Photopea, it can convert between any image format, so you are not dependent on a specific format anymore. Here you can see the user interface of Photopea. So it looks very similar to other image editors. There's a preview of the work in the middle. There are some tools on the left, and the layer panel on the right. There's history and some other elements. One of possible usages of Photopea can be analyzing PSD and Sketch format when converting it to website. You can explore the content of each file. You can also convert the style of each layer to CSS, for example, see the dimensions and location of every object, and you can export to SVG, for example. And in this case, it can be considered as an alternative to Avocode or Zeppelin. Does any of you have experience with Zeppelin, for example? Can you raise your hand? Yeah, I see Sorga. And Avocode? No. OK, let's move on. So this is another example of what Photopea can do. So this is a feature where you want to remove the object from the photo. So on the left side, you can see the original photo. The next image is the red. You select the object with the red color, which basically means what exactly you want to remove. And the third preview is what Photopea does after you select it. So it removes the object. And the last preview is the result of Photoshop of the same feature. So in this case, I think the Photopea performs a little better than Photoshop. In Photoshop, there are some artifacts. At least some objects are not straight, or you can see some strange dots. But so yeah, this can be a very useful feature for many people to remove objects from the photo. Yeah, this is the example of the feature. So on the right side, you can remove some spots from your skin, for example. And on the left side, it's a liquify feature, which is available only in Adobe Photoshop and Photopea. And you can basically bend a face, for example. You can completely change the person to someone else. Yeah, so and this is the example where you can replace faces with faces of other people, or in general, you can replace any object with some other part of the photo. And the feature itself is that it will adapt a new piece of image into the area around it, and it will look like it's naturally blended into the background. So let me tell you something about the popularity of Photopea, who uses it, how many people are there. So it's a web app, there are no downloads nor installs. So it's hard to say who exactly is the user, how many users are there. So I track the page use, how many times the photopea.com is opened in somebody's browser in a month. So at the moment, Photopea is people spend 5,500 hours using Photopea every day. Photopea, the word Photopea is entered into Google search 10,000 times every day. And at the moment, I monetize it with premium accounts. and advertisement. And the premium accounts is basically the same program without ads. So people are paying just to hide the ads. And since February 2017, working on Photopea is my full-time job. It was when I finished the university, and I decided to keep working on it until I make it profitable. And let's look at the page views, how many people use Photopea. So there is a table with a number of users in May of every year. So in May of 2014, there were only 3,000 page views. A year later, there were 10,000 page views. Another year, there were 50,000. Then it was 180,000, then 700,000. And in the May of 2019, which was the last month, there were more. So who thinks the Photopea had over 1 million views? Can you raise your hand? Who thinks over 2 million? Okay, so it had 2,800,000 views in the last month. Okay, let's move on. Now let me tell you some technical details about the development. So as I said, it's a web app, and it has to be made in JavaScript when it's used by the clients. And I didn't want to use any other languages which would have to be converted to JavaScript. So in order to reach the best performance, I decided to make it in JavaScript since the beginning. And I started to work on it in 2012, and I pretty much keep the same syntax, same style of code since then. So it's I think it's ES5. I don't use any Babel. And at the moment, there are 74,000 lines of code, which is the code written by myself. And it has about 2.4 megabytes. This is the basic code of the whole Photopea application. This code is later minified, obfuscated into 1.3 megabytes. And after that, when you open photopea.com, it's transferred from the server in a gzip format. So we could say that the whole code of Photopea is 0.5 megabytes when it's used. And when you open photopea.com, 1.4 megabytes of data is downloaded. There is half a megabyte of the code, as I said. Then there is 370 kilobytes of external libraries, which are parsers for PNG, JPEG. Then 140 kilobytes are localizations of 36 languages, and there are about 600 phrases in every language. And 120 kilobytes are some brushes and patterns, some presets to be used in Photopea. 90 kilobytes are icons for the tools. I think there are like 50 icons. And the 30 kilobytes is the font database. So basically, I have a database of open fonts, which can be used inside Photopea. And there are about 4,000 fonts. And when you open Photopea, the database of fonts is downloaded, which means there is the name of each font and the URL. And once the user chooses that I want to use Open Sans, for example, then the Photopea already knows the URL where it can be downloaded, so it loads the font and it can be used immediately. And for example, we can compare it with Amazon.com, which has 3.6 megabytes of data when you visit it, or New York Times, which has 4.8 megabytes. So yeah, Photopea is much smaller, even though it contains the whole advanced photo editor. Let's keep going. The user interface of Photopea. At the moment when I created it, I knew only the basic HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So I didn't know, and I had no experience with any frameworks. So I just wrote everything myself, like basic CSS and some JavaScript events and stuff. I created some basic form elements, various panels, the windows which can be dragged, closed. And at the moment, there are about over 1,000 lines of CSS in the whole Photopea. Since the beginning, since I started to work on it, I was really trying to make it as performant as possible, so that people don't have to experience any slowdowns, any sluggish behavior. So since the beginning, I tried to write low-level JavaScript, which means I always before I write every comment, like basically I had to think about how it will behave, what exactly how exactly. You should think a little in advance about how it will be processed, converted to machine code, or it's important to think in this way. Like you cannot just write any basic algorithm which comes to your head. And for example, let me tell you an example about performance. So let's say you have an image document which is 4,000 times 4,000 pixels, and there are 10 layers of data. So pixel is 4 bytes, red, green, blue, and transparency. So there are 4 bytes for 8 pixels. There are 16 million of pixels in each layer. So if you count everything, there are 640 megabytes. This is just for storing each image. And when the user, for example, let's say you let the user drag the layer, and since layers have transparency, the result depends on pixels from every layer. So basically, as the user drags the layer around in front of him, you should go through all the layers, all the data, and there are 640 megabytes of data which you should process 60 times per second to redraw it at 60 FPS. So you basically have to process 38 gigabytes of data in a second. And you'll probably guess that it's not possible to do on the CPU today. There's no way to do it. So Photopea uses WebGL technology, and everything is accelerated in the GPU or in some some graphics adapter, for example, on your phone. Photopea supports scripting, so it means that you can write some basic code which will be used to process the image. For example, you can there is an example of for loop which loops for 12 times. It duplicates a layer in every step and rotates the copy of the layer. And on the right side, you can see the original image where you have the beginning. So it will duplicate the rabbit 12 times and rotate each copy. So this is possible to do in Photopea to, for example, to batch process some graphics. And we could say that Photopea improved your browser. By that, I mean that during the development, I discovered many bugs or many missing features in browsers, and I had to report them. Actually, about 15% of what my Photopea development was reporting bugs to browser developers, and some bugs were fixed, some were not fixed. So I guess I reported to Chrome. I reported about 50 bugs, 30 bugs to Firefox, and most of them were fixed. Some of them remain unfixed, but these are bugs which it's not sure if these are bugs or these are features. For example, some keyboard shortcuts. Web apps at the moment cannot use Ctrl-T shortcut because it's used to open new panel in a browser, and browser makers do not want to allow people to reprogram this shortcut. So this and several other shortcuts also cannot be used in web apps. And at the moment, I am in touch with Chrome developers directly. There are several people which we write emails to each other, and when I find something, I don't report bugs anymore, but I write them emails directly. Let me tell you something about the distribution. So basically, I merge all the files which I write into one big file, pp.js, which is 2.4 megabytes. Then I obfuscate this code, and I send the code to a server. It all takes me about 10 seconds, and sometimes I update Photopea like 20 times a day. Just I add new feature, and I wanted to have it online immediately so I can close the issue on GitHub. So sometimes I update it many times a day. Let me tell you something about the obfuscation. So as I want Photopea to be as small as possible, and I don't want others to be able to copy it, I perform obfuscation. And we could say that there are basically two kinds of obfuscation. In first case, you replace only the variable names and names of functions, but it can be done by the Uglify.js library. But can be an advanced obfuscation, for example, by Clojure compiler, which also replaces identifiers. So the Clojure compiler can do much better obfuscation because it replaces identifiers, which, for example, in that case on the slide, you can see that there is the object B, which has a name John, age 42 plus A. But in the last case, there is, instead of identifier name, there is used identifier C and identifier D. So it makes the code shorter, but it should be done very carefully because you can replace for example, the document object model commands, such as document body append child would be replaced also by one letter, and it cannot be done. So in this Clojure, when you do this obfuscation with Clojure compiler, you should have a database of identifiers which you cannot rewrite, and it is much more complex in that case. So I've been using Clojure compiler for a long time, but suddenly I noticed that it became very slow. So for example, to compile 1.5 megabytes of code with Clojure compiler, it took me 70 seconds. So I decided to write my own obfuscator. So I wrote the sqzr.js, which had the same result as Clojure compiler, but it was 50 times faster. And it could compile 1.5 megabytes in 1.2 seconds. And basically, I used existing libraries such as Acorn.js and Escodigen.js, which are a parser of JavaScript, and the serializer of JavaScript. And when you use these libraries, the actual obfuscator is quite easy to make. So many parts of Photopea are open source. They are published at github.com/photopea, and there are basically parsers for some formats such as PNG or PDF, and I'm confident to say that many of these libraries are the best that currently exist in JavaScript for working with these formats, such as PNG or TIFF. Let me tell you about the UPNG library. It is a very small library for parsing and encoding PNG format. It supports PNG format by 100%, which means it can read any existing PNG image. And it also can encode the PNG images, both lossy and lossless, in a lossless way. And so the lossy minification of PNGs is lossy compression is also called minification. Many of you may have used tinypng.com. Has anybody used this service, tinypng? Yeah, I see several hands. Yeah, so basically the UPNG library lets you do the same thing, but you can automate it with the library, and it's open source. It's under MIT license, so it's easy to use by anybody. So what surprised me during my work on Photopea? I was surprised that many standards were not finished, even though the experimental implementations existed for many years. For example, there is still no standardized released standard for camera API and microphone API. They do exist in browsers, but it's still not the final version. Then the WebCL. Has anybody heard of WebCL? Can you raise your hand? Yeah, I see one person. Yeah, so it's basically the OpenCL. It's an interface for performing parallel computations on usually on GPUs or multi-core processors, and it's used for scientific computations or ray tracing in games, or it can be used for many purposes. But this WebCL was standardized about 3 years ago, but it's still not supported in any browser, and it seems it will never be supported anymore. But I was excited. I really wanted to use it for Photopea, but I cannot. Then it was very simple for me to make a JavaScript interpreter for the scripting, which I mentioned before, and it was quite simple to create the PNG parser. And on the other hand, it was extremely hard for me to discover some formulas for graphic effects, for filters, some blend modes. They are not documented anywhere, so I had to search the internet or do my own experiments, trying and comparing the results of Photopea and Photoshop, for example. So this is the last slide. So let me tell you something at the end. I think that Photopea can be useful to many of you for 3 basic purposes. It's as I mentioned, it's an advanced photo editor, which is also free. You can use it to explore PSD files and sketch files, and it can help you a lot to converting the design into a web page. And you can also use some open source libraries that I published on GitHub. And also, all of you can use Photopea mainly by using it and reporting bugs if you find any. I'll be very happy if you do. I'll be very glad if you share it with your friends for which you think that it could be useful to them. And I'll be happy if you want, you can follow Photopea on Facebook, which is facebook.com/Photopea, or on Twitter at photopea.com. Yeah, so this is all from me. Thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I'll be very happy to answer them. Okay, thank you very much.